Hi, everybody. It's Brianna Kelly with Total Mortgage.
And I'm Tom Blake with Remax Liberty.
We're here to discuss some of the market updates that have been going on in our local market in Leominster. So one of the things that you guys have been hearing on the news, I'm sure, is about the rates. It's definitely been a little bit more challenging.
A little bit.
However, one of the big things you gotta want to really focus on is what that payment is, and it's something you keep hearing me talking about. If you need to purchase right now and you can afford the payment, hypothetically, the rates are going to move down, so you can be in a position to possibly refinance. You also want to be very careful about having conversations about, a lot of people are like, oh, you can do it with points. Points are money that you pay up front to be able to buy the rate down. But it also means if you pay that money and you refinance in a year and you paid X amount of dollars and you haven't recouped that savings, that's something that you want to be very, very aware of when you're making a decision regarding what you're paying for points or what the rate is at this time. So right now, definitely seeing some people really looking at their budget to make sure that they can afford those payments, which again, biggest part of my conversation is you need to be able to afford what you're living in. So,
yeah. If I had a quarter for it, every time somebody asked me the question, do you think the rates are going to come down anytime soon? I'd have a lot of quarters.
Yeah, my crystal ball,
Yeah, it would be great. So no is the answer. It's still no, unfortunately.
Yeah.
I mean, so there's some projections that we've seen through NAR that suggest that the sweet spot that both the mortgage industry and the real estate industry would like to see is somewhere more close to 6.
Correct.
But the Fed is still pretty hot on keeping down inflation, which is not really dialing back as fast as they would like it to be. And the jobs market is still really hot. So these are all good things, right? People have jobs. People have money coming in.
Exactly.
People are spending that money. But it's diluting the economy a little bit. So that's why the Fed wants to tamp it down. And their biggest tool in their box is rates.
That's them on the rates.
So we were pretty surprised as realtors to see it bump up over 8%. I mean, if your credit score isn't exactly where it should be, you could be 8.5 right now.
Yeah, and it's and I mean that plays a big difference. You're talking about a difference between buying a $30,000 swing in your payment and sometimes more. And I mean, in a purchase power, and that makes a big difference in this market right now.
It really does. And that's what we want to focus on today. So we're trying to bring a realistic picture of what the market is in central Massachusetts. And we just happen to focus on Leominster the last few videos because that's where we are, right? So, and we're very familiar with that market. But you can certainly reach out to us regarding any market within the central Massachusetts area. So there are opportunities in this market, and we're going to try to outline what an opportunity in this market looks like, just to be very clear. So Bree has updated you on the rates.
Yes.
They're not great, right? They're hovering around 8, even with great credit. They're still hovering around 8.
Yeah.
And we're going to take a look at what that means and how to buy. So the Leominster market is still a relatively hot market for sellers and not a wonderful market for buyers. We're starting to see, as realtors, a little bit more inventory come on. So you might hear a sensational item on the news that there's 20% more inventory out there. Well, again, there's an old saying: we don't take percentages to the bank.
That's an old one, but good one, right?
An old one, but a good one.
An oldie but a goodie. Yep.
So there were about 4,000 homes on the market, and now it's upwards. It's closer to 5. So technically, that's 20%. That's still 20% of what it was when it was a buyer's market. So it's still deeply, deeply a seller's market. Most notably, here it looks like pending sales in Leominster, there's 27 this year in September. And last year there's 24. So it's actually up a little bit, which is a little different. But year to date, there were 238 sales in Leominster. And this year there's only 176. So we're down that whopping 26%, which you're still hearing about a lack of inventory. That is absolutely true. So the simple thing, again, supply and demand, lack of inventory, even in a high interest rate market, means the prices still are continuing to ascend a little bit. So last year, the average house price was $420, and this year it's $440, So the housing market is still continuing to go up in terms of principal, even though the rates are still
Right.
going up, which is a tough place to be. So my favorite statistic that isn't very sexy or exciting is the absorption rate.
Numbers.
Yep, the absorption rate. So to reiterate, the absorption rate is how many homes how many homes have to sell in order for us to run out of inventory. So if you have 100 homes, they sell at 20 homes per month, you have an absorption rate of 5 or 5 months worth of inventory. Currently in Leominster, we have 1.03. And that's actually exactly 20 homes to be specific, or 23 homes for sale right now. So we're out of homes in 1 month still, right? Which is that supply and demand issue we were talking about.
Right.
And the list to sold price is still 103% on average, which means for every $100,000 that your house is, you're probably going to want to look at offering $3,000 more on that $100,000 to get to a price that a seller's willing to
Right.
agree to. So sellers are still very much in control. Doesn't mean you don't have a shot as a buyer. You just need to be prepared.
Exactly.
You just need to be prepared, and we're going to talk about what prepared looks like. Now, this week I picked 2 homes to talk about. There are 2 ranches in Leominster that are for sale. One is listed for $310,000. It's 22 Argentine Street. It's been on the market for 1 day as of today. So $310,000 for a 3-bedroom, 1-bath ranch built in 1965. It is 1,092 square feet. In comparison, now it's a little bit of a fixer-upper. Let's be fair what this is, right? So this is an opportunity. A $300,000 house right now is actually, believe it or not, an opportunity because 60 Judy Drive in Leominster, which has been on the market for 5 days, is a 3-bedroom, 2-bath house that's a ranch built in 1977. And it is 1,092 square feet, exactly the same size. And it's on the market for $385. So means they probably put a bathroom in the basement or something along those lines, maybe a half bath, nothing extravagant, but is a half bath or a bathroom truly worth $75,000? Probably not.
It better be one heck of a bathroom.
It would have to be one heck of a bathroom. Quite the
Self-cleaning or something, I don't know.
a throne, so to speak. Ba-dum-bum. And so if you were to get a hold of this, the Argentine Street, you actually have $75,000 worth of equity that you could potentially build into it.
Right.
So Bree has run some numbers. Keep in mind whatever your rent is, right? So on the $310,000 house, Bree, what am I looking at for down payment, closing costs, that sort of thing?
Absolutely. So we'll say with a conventional 3% down. We'll go with that scenario. So 3% down on $310,000 is $9,300, which is giving you a principal and interest payment about $2,200. You add in taxes and insurance, you're probably talking another $500 approximately, and then PMI probably another $150. So, and then, but I really want to talk about the difference in what the payments would look like. So $75,000. So it's about $7 for every 1,000.
That's a good calculation. $7 for every 1,000. Okay.
So basically, for $75,000, it's about $525 difference.
It's a pretty big difference.
It's a huge difference. So that's a difference of affordability. Now, it's one of those conversations where you're like, all right, do I have the means to be able to fix up the house? Is it cosmetic? Hey, listen, first house I ever bought, we painted and took up rugs ourselves and put flooring down. And it still costs money. That's something you got to be very aware of because it does cost money to be able to go fix up these properties. However, sweat equity is not a bad thing. It's a good way to be able to kind of learn along the way. Of course. So that same house for $385,000, you're talking about a down payment 3% is $11,550. So it's a little bit more of a down payment. So now again, you're talking another probably add another $650 between taxes, insurance, and private mortgage insurance to that payment. So now you're talking about a $3,400 payment approximately.
Okay.
All right, on that particular house. So
$3,400. Okay, got it. Just so I'm clear. Yep.
I know.
Okay.
Right.
Yep.
Tax and insurance. So what's the difference in that payment for you? I mean, that's a $525 difference in a payment. So if you can find yourself an opportunity, which in this market is few and far in between, it's something that you really should consider.
Yeah, absolutely.
Right.
Absolutely. So there are still opportunities out there. It's definitely, and even this, 60 Judy Drive is still a pretty good deal, quite frankly, around here.
Yeah.
I mean, you could get into a house that was a very reasonable house with enough room for,
family.
for family,
Yeah.
and still retain that. You're paying yourself. The good news is you're paying yourself when you own your own home. You're not paying someone else's mortgage off. So home ownership is still the way to wealth here, and
Absolutely.
or that's our opinion. It's a great way to accumulate wealth. All right, I think that is a good. Did you want to talk about any other aspect of the rate at the moment, or did what do you see?
Well,
Like,
the
what are you
only
seeing?
thing. So, for example, when you're talking about the difference of what the rates are from being at 420 for an average, price to 440. So if you're doing the math, that's 20,000, right? So it's $140 difference in payment. So you're talking again $10,000, $70, whatever. So I think it's really important to sit down, and we had talked about it like before, just making sure that you're understanding those budget numbers, because $140 a month may not seem like a lot, of course, but going out one last time a month to go out to eat.
It depends on you. It depends upon
Exactly.
your situation, right?
What your long-term goals are. I mean, are you looking to save? Do you like to go on vacation? Do you want to be able to take that money and put it inside the house? So, but it's just important to have that conversation. But, in relation to the rates, we definitely want to be really aware that they're moving right now. You want to keep an eye on what's going on. A lot of experts seem to think that we might see some relief next year. We have an election year coming up. I'm pretty sure they thought we were going to have some relief maybe the end of this year too. So I guess their crystal ball is broken as well. So again, it's just something that if you're comfortable with what your payment is right now, or what you'd be looking at, that's something you're going to be really, really focused on.
Yeah.
And again, purchasing a home right now, I don't think we're going to see any crash in the market. There's just not enough inventory for that to happen.
Yeah, and I want to reiterate that. So just what we're seeing is realtors right now, houses are coming on the market and they're going off the market relatively quickly. There's still, a really strong demand for housing of any kind, especially in Massachusetts.
Right.
People have great jobs. They can afford a home. They just don't have one to buy. So that's why there's still competition for these homes.
Absolutely.
There's still a decent amount of money out there in the market, we don't see a mass. So there would have to be an enormous amount of inventory that came from, say, a collective pool of banks that decided to release all of their repossessed inventory to essentially crash the market, like flood it with inventory that was distressed inventory that didn't sell. And
very unlikely.
Very unlikely. It's possible. It's possible, but we're at the lowest amount of foreclosures in history, almost. It's like 2%. There's just not that many foreclosures out there. Now, there could be some more, certainly, as time goes on and people over leverage themselves, as they tend to do once they have some equity in their house. Don't do that, by the way. Let's keep that equity.
It's important,
Save it. That's the wealth that you're trying to accumulate. Don't give it away at 8%. Sorry, my opinion held by me there. Again, hold on to it to the best of your ability.
I second that opinion.
Yeah, right?
Yeah.
But anyway, I guess I've come to the end of my little soapbox stand on that one. So that is what we see for. So inventory staying fairly similar. Still a seller's market. Still raising rates a little bit at a time with a potential promise of it lowering in the future, but we're not truly seeing it. So again, make sure if you are going into home ownership, you are doing your research, you're talking to someone like a Bree or I, and you truly understand what you're getting into before you do it.
Exactly.
And we're going to switch and we're going to pivot to the topic of this month, which we would like to be... Appraisal, yeah.
So much fun.
Oh, yeah. So
there's some misconceptions. So what an appraisal is what the bank will order to verify the value of the property, which is their collateral. It's not the same thing as an inspection, which is completely different. Now, are there things that could come up that would come up in an inspection regarding an appraisal? Absolutely. Government loans are pretty big on like chipping paint, houses built
Railings.
before 1970. A lot of safety issues. And I've said this before. Even on conventional loans, they're starting to really come down on that stuff. And I mean, obviously, that liability reasons. If someone falls and gets hurt, and there's something wrong with the property, we don't want that. But with appraisals, the tricky part is in this market where there's such a small amount of inventory. What do you think people are doing? They're overbidding on these houses. So he's saying, that's 103% in Leominster. Well, people are going 110%.
Yeah, to try to lock the property down. Yep.
Exactly. So if there's not comparable sales for that price range, how are you going to be able to verify that the house is worth that? Which means, so the way that they do an appraisal is, okay, I'm going to lend X amount of dollars on this property. I feel like I have, some vested interest in making sure that this property is financed and I'm going to get my payment back and things like that.
So that I'm being the bank right now. You're talking from the perspective of the bank.
Correct.
Okay.
So if I overextend myself, meaning I lend you too much money on that property and for some reason something happens and now the house goes into foreclosure, well, now I'm not in a good equity position.
Nope.
And that's also why it's so important that these appraisers are going to these properties and making sure that the house is worth what is being paid for it in relation to the bank. There's a different conversation about overpaying for a property where you feel like, this is my forever house. I feel the house is worth this amount of money. And there's situations too where I've had one that someone overpaid for the house because, it's on the same street with their family. It was long term. There's daycare savings they'd be seeing because they're right there,
Yeah.
But that overpayment on an appraisal is something that we definitely want to be keeping an eye on. So in relation to an appraisal coming in low, that's a conversation you're going to have with the realtors.
Yeah, that's my fun job, right? So that's a tough part, really. So one of the things that I probably will repeat is I sell your home 3 times as a realtor. I bring it to market, so I try to solicit a buyer, right? So we agree on a price, we prepare your property, we take a whole bunch of pictures, we put it on the market, and we help a whole bunch of people come and say, I'm willing to pay da-da-da-da-da for this property, whatever it might be, And every seller wants it to be 150% of what no, that's an exaggeration, but 110%, right?
I'll take 150%.
Yeah. So we're seeing things like, and this is a real thing. On a $400,000 house, if it's in good shape, you could see a $440,000 being offered on that property. The question is, will it appraise? So the first time I sell it is to the general public to try to solicit, an offer. The second time I sell it is at home inspection. So now they have the buyer has an independent home inspector that comes in. And said, now they look at the property in the minutia, and they look for everything wrong with it, and then they share that with the buyer. So that's negotiation number 1. We're not going to talk about that right now. Then we go to 4 to 6 weeks down the road. So so we go through offer, purchase and sale, home inspection, and then there's this lag time of about 3 to 4 weeks where the bank does its job. And the first thing it does after purchase and sale is orders an appraisal.
Right.
And then it takes the appraiser anywhere from 24 hours to 14 days to show up at your property.
Right.
And then they do the appraisal, and then it takes them anywhere from 24 hours to 14 days to return that appraisal. The appraiser is, and back me up on this,
Yes.
they are an independent, extremely educated, well-vetted, insured person not employed by the bank.
Correct.
Who is there to tell the bank what they think this house is worth in case the buyer decides to not pay for it.
Correct. Yeah.
So banks are not in the job, they don't lose money if they can help it at all, period. So that's their insurance, is this appraiser. And like Bree was saying, in this market, we're having a lot of boundaries pushed. That's what's ascending the market.
Right.
And the people that she was talking about who decide to pay more than the appraisal are what are pushing this market up. They're paying with their own money. They're saying this is worth more than the bank thinks it's worth to me. I'm willing to pay an extra $25,000 out of my pocket because I have it. What happens if the buyer doesn't have that, right? So this just happened to me recently. We marketed it. So a lot of sellers want to market their property for as much as humanly possible. And that makes sense, right? It's your house. You want to get as much as you possibly can. My job is to find out what that number is. And then my job is to actually push that boundary, right? That's my job, is to get you as much money as possible. It's to push that boundary and to get it to the top of the appraisal, right? And justifiably so. That doesn't always work out. And it's a very, very, and I do mean very, uncomfortable conversation with the seller when the appraisal comes back, let's say it's even $10,000 low. Now, on a house that was, say it was that $400,000 house that was offered $440,000 and now it's $430,000. Right. Well, you still got $30,000 more than $400,000, which was the original asking price, but all of a sudden the seller feels like they just lost $10,000.
Right.
And the fact of the matter is you didn't. You are getting everything that property appraises for. You're getting $30,000 more than most likely what some of the other comparables are, which is a really good deal. And it's all about perspective, in my opinion, in this instance. You know, first off, that $400,000 house you're selling in this area right now was worth $300,000 4 years ago.
It was.
You're already $100,000 ahead, right?
Yeah.
So it's really about how you look at it, not necessarily. And this is another part of being a realtor, right? So my job is to help you see the forest for the trees to some degree too. You know, to focus on the positive part. And you know, in a perfect world, I'm going to coach you through that before we get to this conversation, right? I mean, there are not all offers are created equally, and I'm going to bop this back to Bree in just a second, but. If that $400,000 house I had a $420,000 cash offer on and a $440,000 FHA loan that's you know, only 3% down and is heavily subject to the appraisal, this is why you're seeing people like a little worried about FHA right now, which don't be. FHA is a wonderful one, really, really good for buyers and should be utilized. VA is a wonderful tool. VA loans, a wonderful tool, and you should utilize them. You're getting beat up a little bit by the amount of cash that's still out there, unfortunately, at the moment. That's a very painful part for buyers right now, and I'm kind of getting off track. But where was I? What was I talking about?
Talking about if it comes in lower.
Yeah, if it comes in lower, you know, as a seller, please try to keep in mind you are already winning. You are winning by so much right now. You really are. You know, if you have a home that you bought before 2019 right now, you made a ton of money on your home. You really are. Oh, yeah. You know, you made a ton of money on your home. So I would say look at the positive on that one, and try not to focus on that small amount. But it is painful to feel like you lost $5,000 to $10,000. Right. It's a lot of money. You know, it's half a car. Or half a used car, but
yeah, right now, yeah, absolutely.
So yeah, I think it's important to have a good perspective when you go into selling your house regarding appraisal, but you know, I should be coaching you through that, and we should be having that conversation long before the appraisal even happens. Right. So.
Yeah, because he has access to all of the same comparable sales that the appraiser would be using. Now, I mean, obviously, there's opinions attached to an appraisal, you know, to a certain degree. Most of their appraisal report is based on data, which is the comparable sales. Did this similar house of yours sell for X amount of dollars? The condition of the property, the location of the property. So there's a lot of factors attached to that. But these are licensed, certified appraisers. These, you know, they went to school. They have to take continuing education. So they're not just like, you know, Joe Schmo showing up at your house being like, that house is worth this.
Not at all. And they have to apprentice for 2 years to become a licensed appraiser. They work for free mostly for free for 2 years, you know. And they're not inflexible, you know. Their job is to protect the economy to some reason, to some degree too. Whenever another important thing that I as a realtor do is I show them when I meet them for the appraisal. You know, so that's a huge part of my job. I'm actually helping the appraiser understand what happened with like the open house, how many, what the market truly sees, what I used for comparables, and I can't really call them comparables because I'm not an appraiser, but I can call them, you know, similar sales that had happened to help me build my position of value to bring buyers to the table. And if maybe they missed something, they're not infallible, but you know,
and it's happened.
It does happen. It does happen. You know, that is a very big part of my job, is helping both the seller and get beyond the appraisal.
Right.
So.
And the big thing, just another point, is that as a lender, I am not allowed to have any value conversations with the realtor.
Yeah.
One of the big things that came down with all of the rules that came out, you know, years ago, was being able to be like, well, I really needs to come in at X amount of dollars. That's not a thing.
Big no-no.
And I could lose my license, they could lose their license, and that's definitely something that you want to keep in mind. So again, they're doing their best to be able to, I feel like most appraisers try to do their best to get the value, you know, close to where that purchase price would be, as long as it's
reasonable.
It's reasonable. I mean, but I've had some of my best appraisers that are like, you know, the comparable sales are just not there to get this house. Yeah. And then it's a conversation of, do you renegotiate? Does the seller pay more money? Or, you know, whatever the outcome may look like. And that's what Tom is for, because I just go tell you what the numbers are going to look like. So.
And then I help negotiate a nice middle ground.
Exactly.
I help, you know, and as it turns out, the one that came in low, they ended up, you know, making up the difference because it was worth it to them. You know, they just hold a house and they really wanted this particular property, so it was worth the extra $5,000 for them to just pay for it, because they know how hard it would be to go back to the market and find another one that they liked.
In this market,
Yep. That's another important point. So, well, I think I've come to the place where I'm out of commentary at the moment. Anything
same.
you want to talk about?
No, I think just, again, making sure you're educating yourself. Having open conversations about the whole process. Ask any questions. That's what the professionals are supposed to be doing for you. They're supposed to be there as sounding boards. They're supposed to be there for information. And if you're not getting that, you might want to reassess who you're discussing your home buying with. So.
We're happy to talk to you.
Absolutely.
You know, if you're buying a house, make sure you're educating yourself on what it's truly going to look like once you're in there to protect your financial future. If you're selling a house, understand what it's worth and understand what's reasonable. By the way, I do want to say one more thing before I go. If you overprice your house in this market, you are asking for problems. You're asking for problems. So you are way better off to slightly underprice it and get a whole bunch of buyers.
Right.
And you ought to overprice it and sit on the market for a long time. That's a big scary thing right now.
Yeah, and I think with this market, it's definitely seeing people see price reductions or price improvements. Excuse me.
Price improvements. It could happen.
And then people are like, well, what's the matter with that house? And there's probably nothing wrong with it. It's just that you weren't advised properly.
Yep.
So.
All right. Well, thank you very much,
Thank you.
we will see you next month.
Sounds good.
Bye-bye.